Wives of maniacs, why do women marry monsters? American psychopath Ted Bundy, who killed dozens of women, lived with Elizabeth Klepfer until his arrest. When he was in prison, he made a proposal to Carol Ann Boone, who immediately accepted it. We understand what motivates women who are willing to live with serial killers and even give birth to children from them. Is there any justification for them? The crimes are now very close. This is no longer an urban legend or a detective story. We are no longer shocked by murder, violence, blood, they have become commonplace. And because the lion's share of movies and TV series is about this. And because social networks are full of stories about such things. Unless absolutely monstrous stories can still tickle our nerves. The series Dexter and Method. The films Silence of the Lambs and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, or rather, the real cases that formed their basis. See also, The Story of Sharon Tate, a Hollywood tale with a nightmarish ending. Biography of Chikatilo or Pikishkin. To talk about the nature of a serial maniac is a futile business. Professionals have been working on this for decades, and it is obvious that there is no norm there. But one question does not give society a rest: how to treat women who voluntarily became companions of such criminals. To their wives, girlfriends, brides. Is there a norm there? Are they really blind? And if everyone knows, how do they live with it? Do they share responsibility with their men, or are they also their victims? Often such criminals are always perfectly socialized. They are loved by relatives, respected by employees and neighbors, and given the best characteristics. Well, let's say they didn't see, someone else's soul is dark. But the wife, the closest person, could she really not notice anything suspicious? We can't put ourselves in the shoes of a maniac. But in the place of his wife, quite. And it is quite uncomfortable to realize that you may have no idea who is next to you. What's in her head? We ask. In fact, in her head is the same as what any of us would have. Could it be that she simply doesn't know that her husband is a criminal? Like each of us, she needs stability, and her values are based on family and belonging to it. And it associates the partner with itself. It doesn't kill anyone at night. Well, she extends this basic confidence to her husband. He's good just because he's around her. In addition, the husband can consciously distract her, putting her on the wrong track. There are cases when such women felt that something was wrong, but explained the reasons that fit into their picture of the world. Most of all, treason. They attributed any suspicious behavior of the husband to the fact that he has another woman. Feeling this, the husband, accordingly, covered his tracks, throwing arguments in favor of this version. Such men generally live as scouts, constantly creating a fog, confusing and confusing. The blindness of a woman in this situation is phenomenal. I know of examples where, even when they saw blood on the back seat or smelled it from the basement, they didn't try to find out and check something, and they looked for any possibility for a head-fit interpretation. It is pointless to convince, she will deny and refuse to believe to the last. Otherwise, her world would collapse. As it was with one of the heroines of Method. When she learns that the jewelry her husband gave her was taken from the girls he killed, she tries to tear off her rings in hysterics and is ready to cut off her fingers in horror and despair. And if the woman knew, why did she stay with such a man? Is there an excuse for it? The first and really terrible option is the Bonnie and Clyde version, when a woman supports her chosen one sincerely, in fact, becoming his accomplice. She can be genuinely infected with the idea if the man is charismatic in his presentation. There is a study of the psychology of women who want to marry a serial killer. Such were the cases of Chikatilo and Pikishkin. It turns out that they were inspired by super valuable ideas in the spirit of forest sanitation, freeing society from people who are conveniently considered parasites. The bearer of this idea was perceived as a real brutal man, and women were infected with his idea and, most importantly, accepted his chosen method of solving problems. However, there are not many such cases. There are significantly more stories when a woman definitely does not share her husband's desires and aspirations. Recently, a story was widely discussed about how the stepfather tortured his son with punishments and eventually he died. And he and the child's mother tried to cover up the murder. Later, the woman said that she was afraid of her husband. But there were opportunities for her to leave and go public, so why didn't she take them? So, the main reason for her silence was shame and fear of public condemnation. The woman considered herself so dirty that she actually supported the criminal. It was so embarrassing to take the trash out of the house. This is the way of an infantile, intimidated person. Attempts to justify, minimize the scale of what happened, horror, anger at the fact that I did not justify the trust. This terrible mix of feelings and arguments leads to trauma in itself. But the main thing is the fear of condemnation, social, parental, and close environment. Just the thought that everything will come out, blocks the ability to take decisive action, whether it is a denunciation or an escape. Tunnel thinking is formed, a person sees only one path and only one end, which he tries to avoid with all his strength. Everything will be found out, and life will end. I don't want to, I can't cope, I can't bear the shame, so I must be silent. This is where the ration comes in. You need to support, no one will find out, he will stop and will not do this anymore, I can fix everything, just as long as nothing comes out now, and the victim will still have nothing to help. Another motive is to try to save children from shame. In any case, all that is presented to a woman at this moment is quite archaic, terrible pictures, boycott, vilification, stoning. The main question that we ask, and that such a woman asks herself, is whether she shares responsibility with the monster. If she didn't know, of course she didn't. From the point of view of the law, she is innocent and has not committed any crime. From the point of view of the law, relatives are exempt from the need to testify against each other. What about from the point of view of society? When we are shocked by a crime, we crave retribution, remorse, and repentance. Obviously, in these cases, we will not get anything like this from the criminal. But we need to put it on someone. The easiest way is to look at a person who is unlucky enough to live side by side with a monster and love that monster. At the turning point, she will see who is really her friend and who is her enemy. She will experience all the hardships of being a leper, when people pull away in fear of catching something terrible. She scares them, because she was near the monster, and now his shadow lies on her. The presumption of innocence at this level still does not work for us. But this is the mistake of transferring the blame to a person who is already stunned and buried under the remnants of a life that has turned out to be an illusion. In fact, this woman is a victim. In theory, such women need the same qualified help and care as victims of domestic violence. They need the help of a psychologist, a program to overcome the crisis, individual and group work. However, we do not have anything like this. The only salvation for her is the maximum erasure of her identity. Such women change their last name for themselves and their children and move as far away as possible to completely break with the past. Repeat once again. This woman is also a victim of a criminal. To think otherwise, to brand kinship, is to follow the same archaic ideas of collective responsibility, when the guilt of one is paid by the family to the seventh generation. Throwing a stone at her doesn't mean punishing her husband. And to condemn it does not mean to talk yourself and your life, superstitiously convincing yourself that this can't happen to you by definition. She thought so, too.